What happens when one of America's most respected journalists faces off against one of the world's most controversial royals, under the dim glow of the NBC Nightly news studio lights? A conversation that was meant to shed light quickly turns into a battlefield of pride, sarcasm, and raw frustration. Meghan Markle walked in prepared to control the narrative. Lester Holt welcomed her with his trademark professionalism, but within minutes the tone shifted. What began as a polite interview spiraled into a clash so intense, the cameras seemed to tremble in the silence between their words. This is the story of how Meghan Markle's night with Lester Holt unraveled on national television. The NBC Nightly news studio was unusually quiet that evening. The set had been stripped down for an intimate one-on-one conversation. No live audience, no applause, just two chairs under soft but focused lighting, the rest of the room fading into a deep, almost theatrical black. The atmosphere felt serious, heavy with expectation. Lester Holt, dressed in his usual dark suit and calm demeanor, stood to greet his guest. "Meghan, thank you for being here tonight," he said with the steady warmth that had earned him the trust of millions of Americans. Meghan stepped onto the set, her posture sharp, her chin tilted ever so slightly upward. She gave a small smile that looked polished rather than genuine. "It's always enlightening to be invited to these things," she replied, her voice carrying a deliberate edge, as if already bracing herself against imagined insults. They both sat down, the camera zoomed in. For a moment, the studio felt suspended in time, like the world was holding its breath. Lester began gently setting the tone. "You've built quite a life here in America since stepping away from the royal family. How has the adjustment been for you?" A simple question, yet Meghan's eyes flickered with impatience. Adjustment. Lester. "I didn't come here to adjust. I came here to live freely." There's nothing to adjust to when you finally stop being suffocated. Perhaps people should stop framing my life as a struggle to adapt and start recognizing it as me finally being who I've always been. Lester gave a practiced nod, absorbing the sharpness. He didn't flinch, I see, but I think many people are curious about the differences you've experienced. The transition from being part of an institution as old as the monarchy to building an independent life. Here, Meghan tilted her head, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "Why does it always go back to the monarchy? I mean, is there any interview where I'm not dragged back into it? I walked away. Yet here we are, still obsessed with the institution. Perhaps the media should evolve, Lester." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Lester pressed on, calm as ever. "Fair enough. Let's talk about your family here then. You and Prince Harry have settled in California with your children. How has parenthood shaped your perspective?" Meghan let out a small laugh, not one of amusement but of dismissal. "Parenthood is, well, it's parenthood. Do you want me to give you the fairy tale version? The picture-perfect royal family soundbite? Because if that's what you're fishing for, Lester, you're not going to get it." Her tone was clipped, her eyes flashing. The audience at home couldn't feel the tension in the studio, but Lester could. He leaned back slightly, hands folded on his lap. "I wasn't fishing. I was simply asking. People often find it inspiring to hear how public figures navigate parenthood." That's all. Meghan shifted in her chair. "Inspiring, I don't exist to inspire strangers. My children don't exist for public consumption. Maybe people should stop asking about them, as if they're characters in some global soap opera. They're my children, period." Her words hung in the air like a slap. Lester's jaw tightened just slightly, so slight it was almost imperceptible. Years of journalism had trained him to mask irritation, but Meghan's tone was sharper than most of the contentious interviews he'd handled. Still, he kept his composure. "Understood. Let's move forward. Many Americans are fascinated not just by your current life but by what you left behind. The royal family has been central to your story, whether you like it or not. Do you think in hindsight that you underestimated the weight of marrying into such an institution?" For a moment, Meghan froze. Her smile returned, but it was the tight, brittle kind. "You know, Lester, questions like that sound almost insulting. Did I underestimate? No, I didn't underestimate anything. I knew exactly what I was getting into. The problem wasn't me underestimating. The problem was everyone else underestimating me. Do you understand the difference?" Her tone rose slightly at the end, a challenge disguised as explanation. Lester nodded again, still calm. "I do understand. I suppose the reason I ask is because—" But Meghan cut him off, her voice rising louder this time. "Because what?" "Because it's so hard for people to grasp that I was capable of handling it. Or is it because you'd prefer to believe I was naive, that I wasn't strong enough? You see, Lester, that's the narrative people cling to. This fantasy that I was fragile, and I'm telling you I wasn't. I'm not. The silence that followed was thick. Lester adjusted his glasses and took a measured breath. "Thank you for clarifying," he said finally. Voice calm but firmer now. Already the balance of the room was shifting. The respectful conversation that Lester had envisioned was slipping into something else, something sharper, more combative, and Meghan seemed eager to lean into it. The lights above hummed faintly, casting their glow over a set that was beginning to feel less like an interview space and more like a boxing ring. And this was only the beginning. The hum of the studio lights filled the silence as Lester Holt glanced at his notes, steadying himself. Years of live broadcasts had taught him patience, but this interview was already drifting into dangerous waters. Meghan's posture had stiffened, her shoulders squared, chin lifted in defiance. Her eyes carried a glint that seemed less conversational and more confrontational. Lester leaned slightly forward, keeping his voice calm and measured. "I appreciate your perspective, Meghan. Let me ask you about something more personal. Your relationship with Harry. Many viewers wonder how the two of you balance public pressure with private life. How do you and your husband support each other through it all?" It was a gentle question, one designed to soften the air. But Meghan's lips curled into a smirk that almost seemed rehearsed. "Support. Lester, do you think we sit around needing pep talks like some reality TV couple? Harry and I don't need to balance anything. We're not amateurs at life. People underestimate us constantly, as if we're barely holding it together. It's assaulting, really." Lester adjusted his glasses, nodding slowly, letting her words hang in the air before speaking again. "I didn't mean to suggest anything of the sort. I suppose I was asking in the sense of, well, many couples find strength in sharing their challenges, and viewers at home might relate to that." Meghan leaned back, crossing her arms, her tone sharpened. "Viewers at home? Lester, I didn't come here to give a self-help seminar. My marriage isn't a public case study. Harry and I don't exist for other people to relate to. We live our lives, and if people can't understand that, that's their issue, not mine." The atmosphere in the studio thickened. The black backdrop seemed to close in, amplifying every word, every pause. Lester glanced down at his notes again, but this time his movements were slower, heavier. He was aware now that every question risked being turned into a sparring match. Still, he pressed on with professionalism. "Let's talk about the broader picture, then. You've spoken openly about your feelings toward the monarchy. Many people are curious. When you look back, what do you think about the institution you left behind?" Meghan's eyes narrowed. Her voice carried an icy edge. "The monarchy. Always back to the monarchy. You know what I think, Lester. I think it's outdated, antiquated, a gilded cage for everyone inside it. And the funny thing, people worship it as though it's sacred, as though it represents something divine. But really it's theater, a grand performance that eats people alive." Lester stayed quiet, his face calm, but his fingers tapped ever so slightly against his notepad. He had handled presidents, dictators, and CEOs who tried to intimidate him. Yet Meghan's dismissive tone carried a different weight, less political, more personal. "Some would argue," he replied carefully, "that while flawed, the monarchy holds cultural and historical significance. Do you feel any sense of responsibility for how your departure was perceived?" Meghan let out a sharp laugh, the kind that dripped with condescension. "Responsibility? Lester, I'm not responsible for people's fantasies. If the world wants to cling to a crumbling institution, that's their business. My only responsibility is to myself and my family. If that makes me the villain in their story, so be it." Lester tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. The tension between them was undeniable now. His professionalism kept his tone even, but his patience was thinning. "I understand your frustration. But do you ever think that the way you communicate your experiences comes across as dismissive to those who have admired you?" Meghan straightened, her gaze hardening. "Dismissive, or perhaps people simply don't like hearing the truth." "I'm not here to be palatable, Lester. I'm not here to make BLE. Maybe they should reflect on why." For a moment, silence filled the studio, the kind of silence that wasn't just empty air, but thick with electricity. Lester exhaled slow,